Hello and welcome to a brand new podcast, Fantasy for the Week. I'm your host, Ben Fosnot. On this podcast, we'll be talking about fantasy football, of course. Top projections, the weekend prior of how players did, and, how players I believe are going to do in the week to come. So thank you for joining me and listening to the podcast. Week 4 has wrapped up. Heading into week 5. Week 4, we've learned some things. And those things being, Tom Brady. He's still a competitor. He's still looking for another one. As a new team, the question, was it Belichick? Was it Brady? It was both of them for sure, but, Brady's still fighting for something. The Browns, they're a solid team. A lot of doubt and hate towards the beginning of the season towards these Browns, but I believe they've come along strong throughout the week 4s. Another team to surprise a lot of people are, of course, the Bills and their possible MVP candidate, in my opinion, Josh Allen. Their high-power offense led by Josh Allen is just, it's one of the best teams, if not the best team in the league right now. The only thing lacking, of course, is a defense, but the offense makes up for it. And Josh Allen, being MVP, has some great receivers to go along with him, one of them being Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs this week and prior weeks should be your number one receiver. Stephon Diggs is one of those guys, he's a long ball, he can get you short yardage. He's caught multiple touchdowns from Josh Allen. He's been on my starting lineup with Josh Allen. I'm lucky enough to have both of them. So if they're not on your lineup, you should go out and get one of them. But it might be a little late because of how well they're producing points, of course, because, Josh Allen can get you guaranteed 25, Stephon Diggs close to 20 a game. Another one of the MVP candidates, of course, who's on a tear right now is Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson is fighting for that MVP. This year he's looked better than ever, throwing to some great receivers being Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf. Those guys are great receivers. DK with a long ball threat. Tyler Lockett will beat you with speed. Russell Wilson is looking to be the number one candidate for MVP, in my opinion. A close second with Josh Allen. Another quarterback that is also on a tear is the rookie from LSU, Joe Burrow. Holds the record currently for 300 passing yards in the first 4 weeks, which is insane from the rookie behind, a lackluster offensive line. So if he's either on your waiver or he's on on your bench or someone else's bench, it's another guy to go to. If your starting quarterback is hurt, has a bye, or of course, with the unfortunate COVID situations, then they got to pick up. And on that COVID talk situation, the Chiefs and Patriots were postponed. At least they were to play, which is good. But, unfortunately, the Titans had to cancel, which, if you have Derrick Henry, then it's just unfortunate because then you have to put in another backup that's maybe on your bench, not getting as much points. But the Titans are playing the Bills, like I said earlier, a high-powered offensive Bills, and the Titans being off this week and, being not one of the best defenses in the league, that's another reason to start, Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs in your lineup for this week. Some other receivers, of course, Devontae Adams had that crazy week 1 too, and he's starting to dwindle down a little bit, but, behind another great quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, you could be looking to get some points from him this week, of course. Calvin Ridley, another one of those guys who wasn't expected to do a whole lot after his rookie season last year. But he's come in, being after Julio Jones got injured, he's been that number one receiver. And he's been close to averaging, 25 points a game. And for a receiver, that's insane. So if you're not starting him, if he isn't your bench, you got to start him. He's in, receiver 1, receiver 2, option 100%. Some running backs, of course, Joe Mixon made a statement this week. He's one of the top running backs in the league. It's just unfortunate that he has to play behind, a Bengals offensive line that isn't doing him too much justice or Joe Burrow. If Joe Mixon was on something like, like Colts or the Patriots, he could be, in my opinion, like a Saquon Barkley. And he has speed, he has strength, he can get you yards, he'll get you plenty of points. You could see that from last week. But Joe Mixon is one of those guys that it's hard to pick him up because of the offensive line. And he's inconsistent, which isn't his fault. It's just he just can't do much behind, that Bengals offensive line. Now, some top running backs, the injury, of course, Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, those guys are out. And if you have those guys, then it's like you lost your main source of points for the week. And you need to pick up new running backs. And one of the running backs being in the same Carolina offense, Mike Davis. Mike Davis just shows you that really any running back can work well with the Carolina Panthers running scheme. Mike Davis, after the week 1 boom of points, he's not only guy you can pick up. If you lost Christian McCaffrey, you have an injury. But another thing is he's a great trade value. After it's week 1, maybe week 2, his bringing the points, it could be a great trade value for another team that has a player that you want, say like, Aaron Jones, who is currently one of the best running backs, and he's showing you that he is carrying the Green Bay Packers offense. But, go and get yourself a Dalvin Cook, another guy that's, consistent point flow behind, a poor defense, which is unfortunate for the Vikings, but Dalvin Cook is one of those guys like Aaron Jones who's just carrying the offense for the Vikings. Now, some guys that are booming, of course, Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, but another one of those guys being George Kittle, of course. George put up a 40-point performance, which shows you, hey, Travis Kelce is a great tight end, but this guy, George Kittle, may be the best tight end in the league. He went out with a 49ers offense who didn't play well in weeks prior and came out, and he said, "No, I'm showing you what I'm made of, and I'm going out to carry my team." And George Kittle being one of those guys where if he was off your list because of the 49ers offense or because of he was questionable, but I would either trade for him for sure, begin starting him, because he's not one of those guys like the tight ends, because there aren't many tight ends that are doing well, which is hard to do because tight ends aren't like getting the ball and count for blocks and all that. But George Kittle being one of those guys, as well as Travis Kelce, that you need to pick up for that tight end spot. And if you don't have one of those guys, it's hard to produce points from that area of your fantasy for sure. But, some of the busts, of course, being Breida. The Dolphins, unfortunately, are just not what they were expected to be, as well with their tight end, Mike Gesicki. He had a poor week this week. In weeks prior, he's done well. He's filled that role if you had him at your tight end spot. But this week, after this week, seeing it, he may be down towards a dwindle of points just because of his play, the Dolphins' play, which is unfortunate because he's one of those top tight ends, but it's just hard to start him or even put him in your lineup. Maybe a good trade value for another tight end, maybe some other running back or receiver that you need. Some other busts being, defensive-wise, the Titans, having some great value of defensive backs and linebackers, unfortunately busting. Some other defenses being like I said earlier, the Dolphins. The Dolphins are, averaging close to the negatives, possibly in the negative point-wise for defense. The corners just aren't what they need to be. The linebackers, of course, they have one of the worst pass rushes in the league. So if you're the Dolphins, it's time to give up on them for sure. But to go off that, some great defenses that are playing really well right now. It could be, in my opinion, one of the best defenses in the league right now. the Indianapolis Colts. They're showing you. They put up 2 pick sixes. Like that's just insane. If you have them, congrats on the win, because that defense putting up that production, that amount of points is just insane. So if you don't have them, I would try and trade, but I'd be a little late for that. Another team being of high value that are kind of overlooked are the Steelers. The Steelers are one of those teams they're going to be good, but this season you don't know how really good they are. Ben Roethlisberger being back, being healthy, his desire to throw to a great receiver being Juju. Juju's one of those guys that'll be a great point production for you if you don't have him already. He's most likely not in a waiver, but if you can trade for him for someone on your bench, if he's not starting him, that'd be a great trade to make for if you're lacking in the receiver department as Juju, because he's behind a talented offensive line and a great quarterback in Ben Roethlisberger. So Big Ben and Juju will get you points for sure, and their defense is just is lights out. And this is a playoff contending team, in my opinion, that will could go far, possibly even the Super Bowl, which hasn't they haven't been there in quite some time. One of the last defenses being, the Saints. And the Saints are another one of those teams that are overlooked, in my opinion. But, with what they have defensive-wise, their cornerbacks, they've done a great job covering receivers for the past couple weeks now. They have one of the best pass rushers in the game, behind Cameron Jordan, DeForest Buckner. Some great names, some great defensive linemen. Going off linemen and defensive pass rush, the Rams are one of those teams that are up there. So all these teams will get you points defensive wise if you're lacking that, and if you have the Dolphins, just drop and pick up one of these teams I've said. And I believe some of these teams can do a great job for you. But I hope you've enjoyed this week of Fantasy for the Week, this episode. Thank you for tuning in and listening. I'm your host, Ben Fosnot. Have a good one.